Satu, cek.
Jake, Jake. On behalf of the organizer, I have a few announcements to make before the seminar begins. I would like to invite all the participants to be seated as the seminar will begin shortly, and please make sure to have registered on the registration table. And also, please kindly ensure that your mobile phones are in silent mode or turn off. And last but not least, I would like to inform that the toilet are located on the right and left side of the lobby. Thank you. Once again, I would like to inform that make sure your mobile phones are in silent mode or turn off. And I would like to inform that the toilets are located on the right and left side of the lobby. Thank you. To the Honorable Dr. Sukarni Isakasim as Executive Director of Asian Development Bank. To the Honorable Deputy Director SGD Center of Universitas Pajajaran, Dr. Ahmad Komaruzalman, and all the distinguished participants. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome to the seminar of Launch of Asia's Journey to Prosperity, Policy, Market, and Technology over 50 years. Next is presentation of a book from Asia Development Bank and SDGs to the one of representative of Bandung City Government. So we would like to invite Dr. Ahmad Komaruzalman from SGD Center of Universitas Pajajaran to give the book to the representative. And also we would like to invite the representative of Bandung City Government to join to come forward. Okay, so we would like to invite Dr. Shukarni Isa Kasim as the Executive Director of Asian Development Bank to give the opening speech. Dr. Shukarni, time is yours.
Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to really thank the University of Pajajaran, and in particular, this SDG Center for facilitating our discussions this morning. I would not really go through all what we would hear from our distinguished speakers, but if I may take a few minutes from your time to really first introduce our team from ADB that has produced these interesting books. It's quite thick. It's more than 500 pages. I think like quite for those who studying PhDs, would also see that similar kind of work actually, covering 15 chapters. So I would like first to introduce Professor Yasuyuki Sawada, if you can stand up. He is the Chief Economist and Director General of the Economic Research and Regional Cooperation Department, come all the way from Manila. And also we have this Dr. Edimon Ginting, Deputy Director General from the Economic Department of ADB. Also we have Mr. Said Zaidan Shah, the Deputy Country Director of ADB in Jakarta, and also a few other colleagues. In fact, actually one of you proud alumni, Pa Priyasto Haji, who work in ADB in Jakarta. And really an honor for me actually to come to University of Pajajaran. Although I'm not an alumni, but I have a lot of good friends. In fact, actually we've been working for many years. And two of them are very distinguished, as you know. First, maybe Ibu Titi Anas, who is now the special advisor to the minister. And certainly my good friend, Professor Arif Ansari Yusuf. I always admire him, actually. He's very consistent being a lecturer. I tried several times to invite him to Manila to work for ADB, but he says that I love teaching. I love UNPAD. Thank you very much for having us here. Ladies and gentlemen, I think, as I mentioned earlier, in a few minutes I would like to take from this opportunity really to introduce ADB to everyone here. Because ADB is not only a financing institution established in 1966. Maybe every one of you, I believe most of those present here economic student, or at least encountered some economic courses. But ADB is not only about financing, it's not only about economics. In fact, actually, those work in ADB, only maybe about 10% actually really come from economic studies. Most of those who work in ADB very much come from engineering, from social development, from all fields in economic studies. So it really shows how ADB is very diverse, and in fact, actually, how ADB work in many areas. And including, and it become even more important, I think, on SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. And the book this morning that will be discussed, in fact, actually all the information contained in the book, very much highlights, why SDGs has been really important. In my capacity as the Executive Director and Dean of the Board of Directors of the ADB, we've been pushing ADB to really work more, in fact, to really work, and we just approved this Strategy 2030 with 7 priorities. And most of the priorities is very much SDGs on poverty reductions, gender equality, climate change, urban, rural development, regional connectivity integrations, and all these, and private sector operation, of course. So that really shows how important, what we are seeing about our journey as 53 years now, actually, to work on many areas. So that really put me in a very position to really oversee more like global agenda rather than a specific financing. So since last 2 years, ADB has, I'm not saying transformed itself, but very much claimed itself to be more and more as a knowledge bank. Being a knowledge bank is not only about creating more knowledge or produce more journal articles, but also how we can produce at the same time disseminate all this information and knowledge. How we can really disseminate, in fact, actually replicate the best practices that we've had somewhere else, to another country. Like for example, ADB, Indonesia has been an excellent client to ADB. A lot of good projects and development assistance that Indonesia has demonstrated, something that we can take and replicate somewhere else in other countries. Having like 68 countries as members, and also 48 countries of them are client countries, that mean borrow from ADB. From Armenia, which very much the country I represent. I don't know if any of you know where Armenia is. It's like quite close to Europe, all the way to Cook Islands. I mean, that close to Hawaii, and you can see how big the spread of ADB. In fact, actually, we have, I always like in every time I give a speech to really share and ask questions to everyone to think of. Whether any of you here have been to a country called Niue, which is a country in the middle of the Pacific, only one tiny coral islands, and with 1,700 population. But then don't get surprised when I mention the GDP per capita is like 17,000. And you imagine Indonesian GDP per capita is not even more than, I think less than 4,000 right now. Hopefully we would be able to really achieve above 4,000 soon. But you can imagine, but at the same time, this tiny country, what happened to them? One cyclone hits, half of the population's gone. That means more than 50% of GDP gone. That really show, I mean, why ADB cannot just provide financing or develop a project, but also how we can then share knowledge in terms of disaster resilience, in terms of vulnerability issues, and climate change, all these. But then I can tell also a story about countries in Central Asia, country that used to be under Soviet Unions, I mean, but now they try to really open to the market. And they don't have good experts, or like even have long experience in dealing with the market-based system. And what they have in mind is very much to follow what they have been in, what they've done in the past. And then ADB come and help, and we have to provide knowledge to them. Knowledge means that what good practice Indonesia has, we can share with them. In the area of fiscal management, for example, in the area of poverty reductions, we proudly say that we have one single digit now actually in terms of poverty rate. But then the story behind that should be shared. But at the same time, we should also share some maybe fail or failure that we have, not only success, but also failure, bad experience that should not be repeated anywhere else. So this is what it means for ADB to be a knowledge bank. So really a challenge. We've been working like for the past 3 years already, and soon actually we hope by strategy 2030 we will see more and more knowledge work. And today really the good time to really share, hopefully with all the good friends and colleagues here in the University of Pajajaran, what ADB has done in terms of accumulating all this knowledge. And if you see the title of the book, very much about the Asia's journey to prosperity and all this. So I hope this would be a very interesting discussions. And given the experience and the depth of studies that has been conducted or done to this book, so a lot of areas that you can explore even. So I really encourage everyone to be active, ask even from simple questions to really argue about the books. Feel free. This is an academic sort of discussions. But one last thing I would like to mention, I think, and this is something that I always mention every time I speak anywhere in Indonesia, actually. ADB is open to everyone. When I mentioned earlier that I have tried several times to convince, good friends here to help us in ADB, but really that same invitation also I would like to extend to you all. If you feel that you're interested in development studies, in development sort of experience or work, please come to ADB. The only requirement is that I can mention right now, like you just have to have a master's degree with 2 years experience. The rest, you have to be competitive. That's it. So ADB is open to everyone, and it's a good place to work. Of course, Manila is no different from Jakarta, except macet, a bit worse. But I think if you like development, it's a good experience. Maybe Pak Edimon later on, I hope you could also explore that kind of area, how development work actually is interesting to everyone to explore. Again, thank you very much to University of Pajajaran for giving us an invitation and also opportunity to organize these very interesting, hopefully, events to discuss the work of ADB. But at the same time, we would be happy to hear from the rest of the good friends here in UNPAD to share with us what do you think is a good thing to share to us in ADB. Again, thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Mr. Shukarni, and please be seated. SGD
Underserved speakers moderate culture, cooperation between Indonesian universities and external partners, especially multilateral institutions like ADB, is strongly encouraged, including in opening up the new relevant educational programs, not to mention research collaboration. On behalf of SDG Center Universitas Padjadjaran, I would like to welcome you all to SDG Center Universitas Padjadjaran, Bandung, and to the launch of Asia's Journey to Prosperity, Policy, Market, and Technology over 50 years seminar. I'm Deputy Director of SDG Center. I'm speaking on behalf of Professor Zuzi Anna, SDG Center Executive Director, that could not join us today as she is currently in Mecca for the pilgrimage. SDG Center of Universitas Padjadjaran is a venue for multidisciplinary research related to SDGs at the global, national, and local scale. It serves to facilitate sharing of SDGs-related research findings from both the universities and its partners. It also facilitates capacity building to enhance the analytical capacity of academic community and policymakers from national and local level to conduct SDGs-related analysis. Our activity includes providing evidence-based policy recommendation to achieve SDGs, independently monitoring progress of SDGs, mainstreaming SDGs into research and policies, and facilitating dialogue to achieve the SDGs. I understand that this seminar will discuss the recent publication of ADB that is strongly related to our current international agenda, the Sustainable Development Goals, as was mentioned by Dr. Surkani previously. We are delighted to have all of you joining us this morning. We hope that you enjoy this seminar. I hope that you get a chance to interact with all the speakers and hear their thoughts and their insights on the development of Asia over the last 50 years. During the last 50 years, I believe that Asia is growing and more prosperous. But is this development sustainable? I think this is one big question that could be discussed in this seminar. Today, we gather here in this quite historic building. This building has been used for many important events, such as student graduation, up to the professor inauguration few days ago. Now, we also gonna make another historical events for the launch of this timely and important book from ADB. We have tried our best to prepare the workshop, but should you have any idea on how to improve it, please do not hesitate to tell us. Lastly, without further ado, as the organizer of this seminar, with a great pleasure and great honor, I would like to open up this seminar. I wish you all have a fruitful seminar. Thank you.
Next is the presentation of a book from Asia Development Bank and SDG Center UNPAD through the representative of Bandung City Government. So we would like to invite Dr. Ahmad Komaruzalman from SDG Center UNPAD to come forward, and the representative of Bandung City Government, Ms. Herlina Rosalin. And we would like to invite Dr. Shukarmi Ishak Hakim from Asia Development Bank to join the photo session. We would like to invite all the front seat to come forward to join the photo session. Thank you, and please be seated. To begin our seminar, I would like to welcome Mr. Said Zaidansha as Deputy Country Director of Asian Development Bank Indonesia to be our moderator today. Mr. Said, time is yours.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you. So this morning we will have a seminar to discuss basically Asia's journey to prosperity. So this seminar will basically stem from a book that ADB had authored, which is Asia's Journey to Prosperity, Policy, Market, and Technology for over 50 years. Okay. So this seminar will focus on what have, if you look at the world today, Asia is basically at the epicenter of economic growth globally. And Asia's journey to prosperity has been very transformational, particularly in the last 6 decades. And the contribution of Asia into the global GDP has been remarkable. So this seminar will examine this issue, will examine on what have been the factors that contributed to the transformational growth of Asia and the increasing role of Asia in the global economy. For this purpose, we are very fortunate to have with us as the main speaker ADB's chief economist, Dr. Yasuyuki Saweda-san. He will provide us with an overview of this issue, and we'll go through some of the slides in his presentation. And then we will also have Dr. Edimon Ginting, Deputy Director General, Economic Research and Regional Cooperation Department, that will be ready to provide some response to any questions you may have as they relate to Indonesia. I should mention that Dr. Edimon Ginting is our very own. He's an Indonesian, I think one of the most senior Indonesians in ADB, a very knowledgeable economist, and he will be ready to provide any questions you may have as they relate to Indonesia. And then we also have 2 distinguished discussants this morning. It will be Professor Arif Anshori Yusuf, who's a professor in UNPAD, Universitas Pajajaran, as well as Dr. Titi Anas, another esteemed lecturer in the University of Pajajaran, who has recently been appointed by no less than Ibu Sri Mulyani, our Minister of Finance, as her special advisor. So without further ado, I would like to kindly request Saweda-san, Pak Edimon Ginting, Prof. Arif Anshari Yusuf, and Dr. Titik Anas perhaps to come to the floor and
So perhaps let's proceed directly to the presentation by Sawada-san. So over to you, Sawada-san. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and selamat pagi. It's my great honor and great pleasure to come back to Pelajaran University. Last time I visited the university was year 2006. I just checked my diary, and 2005 July I visited for presentation invited by Dr. Armida, and at that time I was presenting a paper on Millennium Development Goal, MDG, and now it's great to see SDG Center has been quite successful and moving forward at Pelajaran University. Before I start the presentation, as ADB-ED Dr. Surkani said, we have a 555-page, very thick book, and I'm trying to share with you main punchline within 15 minutes, 15 minutes. We have our colleague who is one of the leading author of this book, Dr. Juzon Jang. He is a senior advisor of ADB, and he is get connected by internet. So he is also ready to respond any question you may have. I'd like to thank Dr. Ahmed for a very nice warm introduction. Let me start a presentation of the book. So this book is a joint product by ADB colleague. Actually, more than 50 staff members get involved into making this book, and we just completed January 15 a month ago, and already soft copy has been uploaded to our website. So this is a table of contents of a 555-page book. This book is composed of 15 chapters, and chapter 1 is about the overview, and then rest 14 chapters we have a thematic chapter talking about structural transformation, agriculture, technology, trade, even gender, and poverty, income distribution, etc., etc. So this is very nice, comprehensive book. You may think about celebrated World Bank publication published in 1993 titled The Asian Miracle Book. It has been a very high impact policy report published by World Bank. There are two distinct differences between the East Asia Miracle World Bank book and our book, Asia Journey to Prosperity book. Number one, World Bank confined attention to limited number of countries, high-performing East Asian economies. Even they are silent about rapid development of China. In contrast, a book covers all the developing Asian Pacific regions, countries and economy, including China. So that's a number one difference. Number two, our coverage is much broader. Not only in terms of period, timeline, we cover more than 50 years, 5-6 decades of development, and also thematic, as I mentioned, we cover agriculture, gender, and infrastructure, which are less covered by a World Bank book. So I really recommend this is a comprehensive book to endorse what has been happened in Asia in last 5-6 decades. So let me begin by talking about overall achievement, phenomenal growth. Okay? As you can see from these figures, left-hand figure showing that global economy in 1960, Asian share was as low as 4%. Only 4% of global economy was produced by Asia in year 1960, but the year 2018, Asia's share became 1/4, 24% of global economy. So 6 times a share increased over 5-6 decades. And actually, we also put country disaggregation. So Indonesia's share was only 0.5% out of a global economy in year 1960, but now Indonesia's share tripled up to 1.4%. So still share-wise, you may think this is rather small, but dramatic improvement of role of Indonesian economy in global economy. And also Asia showed not only phenomenal growth, but also dramatic poverty reduction. Right-hand figure shows the proportion poor people, poverty rate, and international poverty line of $1.9 per person per day. Year 1980, that was oldest data we have. Asia's proportion poor was 68%. So majority of people were under poverty in Asia 3-4 decades ago. But now this poverty rate became really small, 6.9%. So corresponding figure for Indonesia in 1980, poverty rate was 50% according to $1.9 international poverty line. It was cut down to 5.7% in latest figure. So not only Asia as a whole, but also individual country and one of the largest economy in Indonesia also show the dramatic phenomenal growth and really substantial poverty reduction. So now what's the secret? What's the secret behind this phenomenal growth and dramatic poverty reduction? Commonly, our message, unified message, is market play a very important role. Efficient and effective market play a very important role, supported by a very capable state capacity, and also backed by strong institutions. So this is a unified, some abstract message out of this book. And also we see over the 5 decades, we see a common structural transformation or a policy transformation. Initially, almost all the Asian countries adopted the state-led industrialization policy, and soon after, this policy has been transformed into more market-oriented interventions. For example, in Indonesia, year 1968, new order policies has been adopted, and Indonesian government moved forward to more market-oriented reforms. And then year 1986, government initiated a set of programs of broad trade and regulatory reforms, and that really pushed forward a transformation from really top-down state-led economic growth to more market-oriented, but supported by effective government type of mixture of development. So this is what happened in Asia as a whole, and again, Indonesia is one of the core countries really drive this policy reforms. So now let me talk about economic transformation. So let me start by looking at agricultural sector. Modernizing agriculture is one very important element of phenomenal growth. Main ingredients are land reform implementation and also green revolution and resulting continuous productivity improvement of agriculture. So as we can see, rice yield in Indonesia and other Asian countries really continuously improved because of the land reform and notably a green revolution and high yield variety, modern variety adoption. And this really fuel, because of agricultural productivity increase, more labor can be released from agriculture and can be moved to a non-agriculture sector. So this really fuel non-agriculture sector development, notably industrialization. So actually, in terms of share of total population, we see a dramatic change, dramatic decline of employment share of agriculture and increase in non-agriculture sector, including manufacturing sector as well as service sectors. So Asia as a whole, 1970s, agriculture share, employment share was 70%. This was cut down to 30% in the latest year. And Indonesia, 1970, agriculture share was 60%, now 30%. So proportion of agriculture share cut by half. And that means non-agriculture play a more and more important role in economic development. And initially, this leads to industrialization, and then further, a more export-driven economy pushing up growth. And also, as country rapidly grow, country can export more, and also can involved in international trade by importing goods, learning or imitating foreign technology. So imitation phase was a source of technology progress in the early phase, but now we see innovation play a key role. Innovation really indispensable, and these figures showing human capital accumulation really improved in last 5-6 decades in Asia, and you can see figure in middle in Indonesia. 1960 average years of schooling in Indonesia was 2.4% or 2.5%, 2.4 years or 2.5 years in year 1960. But the years of schooling dramatically improved in Indonesia. According to the figure around year 2010, average years of schooling was as high as 9-10 years. So 3 times or 4 times years of schooling improved in Indonesia. So quantity-wise, we see clearly see human capital accumulation really coincide with phenomenal growth. And in terms of structure, human capital accumulation, physical capital accumulation together supported the structural transformation and also continuous innovation and technological progress. Of course, we cannot ignore role of infrastructure, physical infrastructure. Even if you have a human capital, physical capital, lack of electricity can be binding constraint to support the structural transformation and continued growth. So it's very critical to have a very stable and robust infrastructure. In terms of infrastructure, again, we see dramatic improvement around Asia, especially left figure, electricity generation capacity. However, depending on the type of infrastructure, we see some lagging behind element. Right figure shows the access to improved source of piped water, safe water. You see Indonesia is second one from the bottom. Over 5 decades, we don't, actually this is a comparison between 2000 and 2017. Over 2 decades, we don't see much improvement in terms of a specific water, safe water access in Indonesia. So there are some binding constraints, but overall infrastructure has been a really driver of the economy. And on top of that, a soft institution or policy environment or socio-economic environment play a key role. And government really set a very good ecosystem of development by providing very stable, very good macroeconomic environment. So left figure shows the growth rate and right figure shows the inflation rate. We can see Asian authority and government have been very, very successful in setting a good macro environment by adopting a wide variety of macro management policy tools. So these are the rather domestic focus, that structural transformation, technological progress, role of human capital, infrastructure, macro management. But finally, not least, we should point it out role of external partners. Both bilateral partners and multilateral partners and multilateral development banks, including ADB, play a very important role, especially early phase of development in financing necessary investment, especially infrastructure and also social sector like education and health sectors. This figure shows the net capital inflow divided by gross investment. So how gross investment have been relative to the size of gross domestic investment. What's the external inflows quantity-wise? Which one play a key role? Initial phase, we can see orange part. That's the bilateral and multilateral net official flows play a very important role. And then 1980s and 1990s, green part became bigger. Green part means showing foreign direct investment. So initial phase, official inflow play a very important role, which soon after transformed and replaced by more market-oriented capital flows. So that clear pattern we can see from Asian Pacific region. And so this is the final, this is the final slide I'd like to show you. And this is one of the critical kind of points we would like to discuss. Many people think Asia is exceptional. So we also discuss whether Asia model is unique and cannot be replicated, or Asia model is nothing mysterious and can be replicated. So our tentative discussion included in this book is Asia model or Asian development model is not unique. This is really following a standard economic textbook. And also, unlike many revisionists are talking about Washington consensus, so-called Washington consensus, neoclassical type of argument, and the Asia model are basically the same. Okay? So here we listed 10 elements of so-called Washington consensus made by Dr. Williamson, who is a really guru of, or he invented this term, Washington consensus. There are 10 elements listed here. First 3 are about fiscal reform, fiscal discipline, public expenditure, and tax reform. So 3 really reform in fiscal side. Fourth one is a financial liberalization and reform, market-oriented reform in the financial sector. Okay, 4 is domestic financial and the fiscal and financial issues. And the middle 3, competitive exchange rate, import liberalization, FDI liberalization. This is about open, market-oriented, open-oriented economic reform. Okay, and then finally 3 is about the regulatory reform and also setting institution right by privatizing state-owned enterprise SOEs if necessary, and also deregulation. On the other hand, keeping a clear, protection of property rights. So these institutional, setting institutional right type of policy also ingredient of Washington consensus. Actually, Asia, looking back 5-6 decades of Asian development, Asian countries' economy just follow the same type of policy recommendation. Okay. So in that sense, we say Asian model is not different from Washington consensus or textbook economics, textbook recommendation of economic policies. But we would like to point out the speed of reform and the way Asian countries adopted these policy recommendations are a little bit different. Okay? Asia took a much more gradual approach to incorporate these policies, and also pragmatic approach, often involving small-scale piloting and then scaling up. Also, other important issue is Asian countries and economies learn from the peers. Okay, so other countries adopted this type of market-oriented reform, and then other countries really learn from that experience. So mutual peer effect of a broader social capital in a policy arena, that seems to be really unique to Asia. But having said this, we discuss Asian model and Washington consensus are not much different. Okay, so this is a kind of a abstract discussion, but we thought that this is also important feature of our new book, Asian Journeys to Prosperity. Anyway, I would like to stop here, and we can discuss further about this book. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Saweda-san, for that very enlightening presentation on Asia's journey to prosperity. I took note that mainly as well as constructive engagement with bilateral as well as multilateral agencies such as ADB. Now, I'd like to sort of turn the floor over to Eddie Monginting, our Deputy Director General for the Economic Research Department, and also a fellow Indonesian, to probably give a bit more of perhaps color into the Indonesian context in terms of Indonesia's journey to prosperity before we go to the two discussants.
Thank you very much, Pak Said. So if I were to pick what are three most important lessons from the book for Indonesia, I'll pick three of my favorite. But I picked this choice simply because, you know, Indonesia has been part of this good story. I think Indonesia has been growing well. I think poverty has reduced dramatically, as Sawada-san said. And we have managed our macroeconomic policy relatively well. So that's why, and I don't need to pick up macroeconomic policy now. And also, I think in terms of infrastructure, we have been managing to increase investment in there significantly. So I don't pick up infrastructure anymore in that context. My three pick is going to be something related. Number one is about economic transformation. I think if you look at in the last 5 years, Indonesia has done well, but in the last 5 years we have been struggling. So every time we try to grow higher, either inflation or our current account deficit will be problematic. So I think that comes because our economic transformation is not as strong as some of the higher performer country. I think from agriculture we move quickly to service, and that service is not that high productive, and our export performance in general is a bit weaker than a number of good performers in the region. I think that is the area, in my view, where we should look at, and we need to have a bit more diversification in our export. If you look at our top 10 export now, all of them are actually related to either mining or commodities. So I think very little of them related to higher productive manufacturing and so on. I think that is the area, in my view, where we should at least try. It's questionable also whether every country should be exporting manufacturing, but at least we should try, because it provide very good opportunity for productive employment, and it also help us because it diversify our export from commodity and to others. I think for the two reasons alone, we should do manufacturing as to enhance our economic transformation down the line. Yeah, and secondly, it's also important, I guess, as Sawada-san said, as Indonesia is going to be moving up further from middle income to higher income, the role of productivity innovations will become increasingly important. So innovations happen everywhere. Manufacturing also usually come up with stronger texture of innovations. That's another reason. My second pick is on human resource development. I think here Indonesia has done well, I think, in terms of bringing people to schools, school access, and so on. It's done well. But in terms of quality, I think to be speaking openly, I think we need some work to do. And if you look at the country in the region, where they have a lot of this manufacturing export, they have a lot of innovations, they tend to be having a good PISA too. Look at East Asia. East Asia is the place where you have all of this innovation, manufacturing. They are the leading researcher, patent, as Sawada-san said. I think they tend to have good PISA too. So I think it's time to relook at the importance of this science and so on in our curriculum, because we seems to be weak in there. So I think that is my number two pick. I think it's good to hear also that our government is very progressive in this education and using technology and so on. I think, in my view, I just shared during the discussion today, there's room for doing more for less in our education. I think we should pursue that in the context of bringing more success and prosperity down the line. And my last pick is about environment. I think you could actually expand this also, not only environment per se, but also social environment. I think more and more growth in the country are now coming in the city. I think city like Bandung also, we have more problem, more traffic jam, more pollutions, and so on. And if you add some more rain to Jakarta, then there's some disaster. So I think we cannot survive, we cannot have high growth without tackling environment issue a lot better. If you expand also to social environment, Indonesia as diverse as it is, and also income inequality is very important. So in that context, we should along the way bring these three in synergy to address also income inequality. I think that's all I have, Said. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. This is very helpful. I think this is also a good segue for me to now turn to the two esteemed discussants. I'll probably invite, if I may, Prof. Arif Anshori to provide his overview of the presentations made by both Sawada-san as well as Pak Edimon. Thank you. Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. First of all, I would like to invite everyone to go online later after this seminar to read directly at least the first chapter of the book, because that's the only way we can grasp the comprehensiveness of these very outstanding publications. Okay, you will learn a lot as a lecturer or even as a student. So I even consider it to be okay. So this is the one on the right is our Bible of Development Economics 101. Okay, this is the Todaro book. Everyone who graduate from Development Economics in any university in the world, I think, may have at least touch, not open, touch the book, or copy it. So my strong suggestion is that you, because the book contain, the IDB book contain 50 years of the most remarkable development, economic development in the Asian region. This is a very valuable supplementary addition to the lecture. I haven't read everything. Yeah. I skipped some of all of them, and I think this is a very telling story about how Asia, as a special region in the development, the world development, was analyzed very thoroughly in the book. The book itself, the thickness is thicker than the Todaro book. So I suggest that you, any lecturer that do development economics, use this book as supplementary reading, the very up-to-date one. I even talked before in the conversations with the authors and Pak Edimon and everyone that maybe ADB can set up a few online lectures so that we can, here in Indonesia and everywhere in the world, to be use it as a part of the lectures that will make lecturer Unpad easier job to do. So that's what I suggest, and maybe we can do that. So because of the thickness and the wide comprehension, the wide coverage of the book, I won't touch all aspects. I have a liberty, as Pak Edimon as well has the liberty. I have a liberty of pick 3, because Pak Edimon 3, I 3 too. Okay, so event, yeah. So I choose the thing that interests me the most. Yeah? The first is, but the 3 is quite important because I don't really like to talk a lot about the 50 years histories, because I know we will learn a lot of lessons from 50 years of history, but we cannot be sure that these 50 years in the history will come the same again in the next 50 years. It will be totally different. People won't imagine 50 years ago in Indonesia, where I think 60% of people or 70% of people work in agriculture. Now, maybe a lot less. Who will feed us if no farmers, for example? In Japan or in other country, no one will have visions of this long enough to see what will happen in the next 50 years. So what I'm saying is, what happened in the last 50 years in Asia can be a good lessons learned for us, but it's not necessarily the thing that will actually happen again. So I will focus more on futures. So the 3 things that I have come most interest the most in the future to come is three. The first is the role of inequality, because we have still trouble issue there. That was acknowledged in the book. The second one is the role of new technology, and the last one is about the future of structural transformation, which actually have a bit of connections between these former two. So let's see the first about inequality. Let me start with a story. So this is a classic. Okay, many of the part of the book tell about the miracle of East Asia. There is an article written by Robert Lucas called "What Make the Miracles," and in that book, from that book, I created these tables. So this is a history, a tale of two countries, which markedly similar in the 1960s, but turned out to be venturing in a different kind of future in the next 20 or 30 years. That was the Philippines and the South Korea. So if you can see, the initial conditions of both countries in 1960 are almost alike. Almost alike. The per capita income is the same, population size similar, working age percentage 50% both of the country. The population of its capital, Manila and Seoul, is almost the same. The education level, the same. College enrollment, the same. The share of agriculture in GDP, more or less okay, the same. The share of the primary commodity of export is also almost the same. So all the same. The initial condition, all the same. The size is almost the same. But from the 1960 to the 1988, or even the 1990s, they venture into different kind of progress. Korea, per capita income, this is not economic growth, per capita income, economic growth minus the population growth, okay? 6.2% per year. So the size of the economy double in 7 years. But the Philippines, only a third of that progress, only 1.8% growth. So what make South Korea a miracle, and what make the Philippines is not a miracle? And one other author called the Roland Benabou, he wrote in the NBER Macroeconomics Annual a few years after that, saying that the only thing that he saw, what make them different is the initial level of inequality. Initial level of inequality. So you can see that the Korea Gini coefficient in 1960 is 34%, the Philippines is 51%. So Philippines actually inherited the two kind of legacy from two from the Spaniard. They inherit what it's called the landlordism. The landlordism. So they have landlord everywhere, but it's also augmented by the gun ownership legacy of the United States. So both combined. Can you imagine? Okay. So and the top 20% income share ratio to the bottom 20%. Look at that, double. So initial condition on inequality is the different thing. So it's naturally it's naturally that we may want to look at, maybe this is the relevant one, the relevant differences that what make them grow more and grow less. And that actually was the finding of even the more recent literatures. If you see this is the more recent literature. So this is the article in Journal of Development Economics in 2012, which say actually what make economic growth sustain. There are so many factors. They are FDI, they are exchange rate, competitiveness, they have external debt, they have trade openness, they have political institution. But what matter most is the income distributions. Why? It's a long story. I will give a 1 hour lecture about it, but I'm not going to do that. But actually, inequality has been seen by so many developmentalists, policymakers, as an outcome of the growth, but in fact, it may be the other way around. So this is the necessary conditions for future growth. So what I call equity for growth. And fortunately, it was raised very beautifully in the book. In this page, they say that the instrumental value of the inequality, here is about inequality, say that it's related to a sustaining growth. So equitable income distribution has environmental instrumental value in sustaining economic growth. So growth may not be sustained if the benefit is not widely shared. So thank you for ADB to acknowledge this very nicely. So ADB acknowledged this. Yet, if you see on the ground, if you see the reality checks, for example, in Indonesian context, I think it's not been well mainstream. For example, here this is the slide from BTP was there. I was sitting in a presentation by the Ministry of Industry, and then the title of the presentation is "To be top GDP." Okay, to be top GDP. It's not even per capita income. To be top GDP in the world. What the hell is that? To be top GDP. I don't see any so many relevant in that thing. Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. It's halal to be top GDP. But if you see the second slide, which saying that Indonesia is actually among the bottom in the percentage of social spending for the GDP. So I don't think the importance of equality in sustaining growth has been well mainstream in the policy agenda. So this is the challenge. So that's about inequality. The next one is about technology. This is also from the book. Sorry if I make a bit of rough conclusion or estimation from the book, but this is what I saw from the book. So if you divide this period into 1970s or 80s, 1990s to 20s, and in the late 20s, and then I conclude what is their estimation about the FV growth and their inequality. Sorry about inequality because that's my area. So in 1970s and the 90s, there literally no productivity growth. No technological progress if you measure by TFP, if you read the book. Yeah, okay? And that's actually, coincidentally, I didn't say any causation, coincidentally it was at exactly the same time when the inequality is actually stable. But in the later period, in 1990s, there is a little bit, a small growth of productivity, okay? And it's coincidentally happening with the rising inequality as well as in the late 2000s, which is saying that now we have large growth, big growth in the total factor productivity, and also we see a rising inequality. Okay, now my mind start to think. I'm trying to connect the dot, okay? But this is not a science, okay? This is cocokologi kalau dalam bahasa Indonesia ya. Cocokologi ya. And my brain trying to connect the dots, and I think this may have been related. Why? Because if you see from the experience of the developed countries, the rapid technological progress has been associated with new technology development. And that's not only included in developing country, actually, but in developed country, but also in developing country. If you see this data, you see how robotization rate, this is rate, not the number of robots, the rate of robotization in production has been increasing everywhere, not to mention in developed country, but the rising rate in Asia has been more recently very big. Look at China. It's still in the bottom, but look at the exponential growth that they experience. So this is this new kind of technology, because inequality and economic growth is endogenous variable that has to be triggered by something maybe exogenous. And in many models, technology has been so technology is exogenous, right? In many models, but I know it's not endogenous, but in many models exogenous. So it's a natural to think that technological development has been what behind the inequality, and this actually what happened exactly in the West. If you see this data, okay, so what's behind the rising income and inequality in the Western world is actually what is called SBTC, skill bias technological change, which is we human replaced by machine. Yeah? But that was perfected by another new theory, which is called routine-based technological change by David Alter and Somoglu et al. More recently. So it's kind of different thing, not really necessarily the same, but different routine. So many routine tasks has been replaced by robot, by AI, by machines, and this actually make the middle wage missing So people who cannot equip or cannot be well suited to the replacement of routine tasks by robot and machine, they fade. Nasib mereka, they fade only have two. So they climb to the higher wage because they can complement the robot or the machine. But another possibility is they climb down to the low wage. There's no place in the middle. The middle will be replaced by machine. So that's what is called job polarization, and that's happened, empirically proven in many recent empirical articles in well-established journal in the world. So that was what happening. And there is no reason to believe that is not going on in Asia, in developing country. Actually, I'm doing a research now with UNU-WIDER on exactly this thing. It's working on progress about the labor polarizations in developing country, including Indonesia. So I will share later on in another event about this. Very interesting. So this is what the future will look like, that the future that we have to anticipate. Okay, so that's the second one. The last one. The last one is structural transformation, because the Asian development in the 1950s has been fueled by industrialization. Some of them state-led, some of them market-led, some of them gradually market-led, but it's industrialization. Or, to be more precise, manufacturing export-led growth. However, I'm not saying it from myself, but this is the guy that I look up to. This is Joseph Stiglitz. I was there in the presentation in Helsinki one day, and he said something like this in the paper. He said that if you see manufacturing share of GDP of the world, everywhere in the world, in East Asia, everywhere in the world, let's say from 2000 to 2025, it's all non-discriminately everywhere. They are declining. So this is the industrialization, and in many countries it's natural, like in the developed country, but in some country it is premature, and it's not good, because the source of economic growth in Asia in the last 15 years is this one. So if there's no room for future deindustrialization, so what are we going to do? And this is exactly what Stiglitz says. Stiglitz says basically manufacturing export-led growth can no longer be the heart of a country's growth strategy. If you really interested in his paper, I specifically created a special line for this. You just type this in your browser and you just go to his paper. It's a very interesting article from Joe. Yeah, and if you see in the context of Indonesia, okay. Okay, so yeah, you see this, that actually this picture is coming from our forthcoming book about structural transformations, published by UNU-WIDER with several colleagues of mine. So Indonesia experienced what is called in this kind of topology stall industrialization. Stall. Actually, it has in the industrialization, especially premature industrialization. I learned that it is a sensitive word among policymakers in Indonesia. They will be a bit, like offended. No, we are still industrializing. Okay, but look at the data. You may have still increasing service of industry or manufacturing industry, for example. But look at that. At least the percent of employment stable or industry or so it means stalled. So the industrialization is happening here as well as in many other part of the world. Yet, see, this is not the pictures, but let's see this one. So, yet, if you see the visions of Indonesian government, this is what is called Indonesian 2045 visions of Indonesian government. So they want to see Indonesia in 2045 increase its share of GDP of industry, in 2016, 22% to 32% in 2045. In the world where the industrialization rate are declining. So my question is it are they aware of recent literatures, or are they aware of what's going on in the world, or they may want to do it with human or with robots? Okay, so this 2045 is a long time here. So these decisions have a very direct consequences on social aspects of development, including inequality. Because if you let manufacturing grow, ignoring who will produce them, human or robot, then we have an issue of labor polarization, for example. So I think this comment from me maybe more leave questions, yeah, rather than answers. But I think I emphasize, in my view, what is the relevant point for the next 50 years. If you want to know more about the last 50 years, this is more than perfect book to read. Yeah, when we have still a lot of research agenda, which may be not that similar to the last 50 years issues. And this three is among them. I think that will close my comments, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prof. Arif Anshari Yusuf, for that very comprehensive presentation. I'd like to now invite Dr. Titik Anas to provide some overview in the context of Asia's journey to prosperity. Okay, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for SDG Center to ask me to be one of the discussants for this very interesting book. Actually, I read the book with great interest. I think I read the first chapter twice, and it is well written, so it's beautifully written. So I really encourage for the participants here to read the book from the first chapter. So congratulations to ADB team to produce this useful, I think this is very useful book for Asian countries, so that everybody can learn from the experience of the successful and not so successful countries in Asia. I believe the work is the 3 years and lots of experts. So this is not amateur who write the books. So we highly appreciate the effort to bring together all the experts to come up with this beautiful book. The book, as mentioned or presented by Sawada-san earlier, and Pa Edimon also, describe the successful journey of the ASEAN countries, 58 years if I see the data. It's comprehensively discussed the journey to prosperity of the countries, and with the emphasis of the importance of market, the importance of effective governance, and the importance of effective policy. So market will not work if the governance and the policy is not right. So I think these three combination of factors really highlighted well in the book. And one of the important elements of the book says that the Washington Consensus works, yeah, and Asia implemented in its own style. I call it Asian style, which is gradual and sequential. Yeah. And the book discussed the outcome of the 58 development and also the successful factors to the outcome. This is the highlight of the successful factors that is discussed in the book. Some already touched upon by Pa Edimon Ginting and also Sawada's son, and also Pa Arif Yusuf. I will discuss one aspect that I'm interested in, because several others already discussed by either Pa Edimon or Professor Arif Yusuf. So these elements are very important, so that's why you have to read the whole chapter basically. So the achievement is the high growth of the Asian countries. Here is the table that you can find in the book. And what intrigued me actually that the achievement is different from 48 countries, member countries of the Asian Development Bank. Next, yeah. So if you look at the table 2 in the book, it says that the developing countries' income per capita increased 15-fold in the 50 years. Actually, this is driven much by China, who increased 40 times compared to the 16. And some other countries like Korea that have been discussed by Professor Arif earlier today, and Singapore, also China Taipei. What about Indonesia? Indonesia increased like 6-fold compared to 1960s. And look at other ASEAN developing countries. It's not as spectacular as China or Korea. So we have lots of homework of Asian countries, yeah? But the recipe is already provided. Whether you take it and enjoy the prosperity, higher income per capita, everybody enjoy the benefit of development, or we opted not to, with the consequences as already given by Professor Arif earlier today. So much homework that we have still need to take care for Asian countries. And if you see this figure where Professor Sawada-san already mentioned earlier that the share of developing Asian increased from 4% to 24%. This much of the increase is more than 50% contributed by China. So we have lots to catch up, basically. I like to focus on one of the chapters discussed in the book. It's my favorite actually, trade, foreign investment, and openness. Who doesn't like foreign investors? Do you like foreign investors? Do you like imports? Anyone hesitate to import? Okay, you can save the answers. But this slide shows that some of the Asian countries not only receiving foreign investment, but also being an investors in other countries. Yeah, much of the development of the successful Asian countries is due to foreign investment. So they receive investment from other countries. Because why? Because they want to grow beyond their potential that can be afforded by domestic saving. If you don't have enough domestic saving, you should draw the sources from outside. So there, the foreign investment play a role. So the right-hand side is about foreign investment. The left-hand side and the middle is the share of exports in Asian countries' GDP. Unfortunately, Indonesia is quite small in that graph. Sorry, we are not on the far right or in the above of the graph, but we are in a bit down below. What does it mean? It means that Indonesia, the middle graph says that Indonesian export in the 60s, the share is not much different in the 2018. So we are not that outward looking. We are not that into the global market. One of the study that I did 2 years ago suggesting that if you want to export, you have to import as well. Why? Because your domestic producers might not be able to produce everything that you need to produce your export. So, in order to increase your export, you have to import as well. Are we afraid of imports? At some point, even to improve the performance of the manufacturing sectors, imports is very important, especially the raw materials, the intermediate input, and the capital goods, because we cannot produce everything by ourselves. Next slide, please. Okay. The book described the strategy the Asian countries follow is from import substitution to export orientation and to later global value chain. What are these three differences? Import substitution means that you try to replace imported goods with the one that you produce domestically. Those policies adopted by the Asian countries in the 60s. Later on, the Asian countries, the successful one, adopted outward oriented. So they export and also import. So they expand to the global market. But the later period says that the production system changed. Countries don't produce everything by themselves. They cooperate to produce. So, in order to produce one motor vehicle, not only Japan that is involved, but also many others in Asia. In order to produce a phone, a mobile phone, it's not only one country that's involved, but also many other countries. Not many, increasing number of products are now produced in collaboration across countries. That's what it called global value chain. What do we do? If you see or read the news or in the media coverage, you often see or read that we want to have more downstream industries, right? Or we want to reduce imports. In the GVC type of production, you don't limit import, but you try to expand in your best ability. We call it your most competitive advantage in the economy, in producing something. So, Indonesia itself, in this element, really have homework to address. Yeah. First, on our openness. Second, on our policy towards foreign direct investment. And third, on our approach towards trade. The book provides lesson learned from for Indonesia, but also for other countries in Asia, on how to be prosperous. And the book suggested to be the top achievers, you should do several things, like Professor Sawada mentioned as a tax reform, fiscal discipline, and so on. There are a list of things that you have to do. So, to be a top achievers, we should not do anything against the recipe, basically. Otherwise, we are going to end up to suboptimal development achievement. I think I'll close my with the following issues. I would like, because it is not much discussed in the paper, in the book, I mean, that there is a huge gap among ASEAN countries, Asian countries, how Asia deal with it. If we want to get a convergence among ASEAN countries, what should we do? How the ADB, for example, address those who left behind in the development? I think, once again, high appreciation to the book. I second Pak Arif's suggestion to have this discussed in our classes at Universitas Pajajaran, because it's rich with the empirical evidence from our own neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Titi Anas, for that thought-provoking presentations, including the last slide on the remaining issues. I think that's a bit of a homework for ADB to look into. Pak Saweda San's office, as well as Pak Edimon Ginting. Now, before I invite questions from the floor, we have through Skype another colleague from ADB, the senior economic advisor, Juzong Zhang. Juzong, are you still in Skype? Hello, Juzong. Is Juzong? Okay, maybe we'll come back to him. I have a question that I like to raise to him. He was our deputy chief economist, and I would like to get from him maybe some overview as well on what would be the three recipes or the three reasons for the transformational growth of China. As Dr. Titi mentioned, the books indicated that China grew by 40 times from 1960 to 2018, 40 times. I mean, that's remarkable transformation. So that's a question I like to pose to Dr. Zhang later when he's contactable, when we can reach him. Meanwhile, I would like to invite to the floor some questions that you may have. Saya ingin mengundang teman-teman untuk mungkin bisa menanyakan pertanyaan. Silahkan dalam bahasa Inggris, silahkan dalam bahasa Indonesia. Nanti saya coba terjemahkan. Ini adalah satu kesempatan yang luar biasa karena kita ada Chief Economist-nya ADB dan ada juga Deputy Director General ADB untuk Economic Research Department. Jarang mereka berdua dalam satu forum biasanya. Selain itu kita juga punya dua orang pakar ekonomi dari Indonesia, Profesor Ansari Yusuf dan Ibu Dr. Titik Anas. Jadi saya mengajak teman-teman untuk memanfaatkan kesempatan langka ini untuk menanyakan tentang bagaimana Asia bisa menjadi salah satu pusat pertumbuhan ekonomi dunia dari 4% menjadi 24%. 34% kalau kita hitung juga negara-negara maju yang ada di Asia seperti Jepang, Australia, dan Korea. Oke, saya undang teman-teman jika ada yang ingin bertanya. Ada satu di pojok kiri, satu Pak Ahmad ya. Mungkin saya satu lagi. Mungkin 3 pertanyaan terlebih dahulu. Jika ada pertanyaan dalam bahasa Indonesia nanti saya akan terjemahkan. Tapi nanti jawabannya mungkin akan dalam bahasa Inggris. Silakan, mohon memperkenalkan nama dan dari mana asalnya, terus dari mana asal instansi, terus juga pertanyaannya. Over to you.
Okay. Let me introduce myself. My name is Putri Reswani Halim. I'm from Universitas Pajajaran. I wonder that Professor Arif said before today is the challenging era. The technological development more than before, and then there is existence of job polarization. We hope Indonesia and other countries in Asia can the leader of economies in the world. So, as younger generation facing the era of robotization, what should we do? And because the young generation is the key of successful in a future era. I think that's all from me. Thank you. My question is delivered to all of you because I think each of you there is the idea and we can hear all of the ideas. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm Ahmad from Universitas Pajajaran. I think I would like to ask again that I said in the speech before that we know that Asia has quite remarkable growth during the 50 years, but the question is it sustainable or not? So that's the big questions. And then given the sustainable development agenda, do you have any suggestion on how to improve the what path should the ASEAN take to achieve the sustainable development agenda? Thank you. In Asia, yeah.
One moment, please. Neng.
Good morning. My name is Lutfia Delana Putri. I came from STI Alan Bandung. Sorry, maybe I will speak Indonesian because I can speak English fluently. Pertanyaan saya terkait dengan ekonomi pembangunan berkelanjutan, apakah dengan peningkatan ekonomi berbasis digital atau e-commerce di Asia ini otomatis akan mengurangi di sisi agrikultur dan kemanusiaan. Gitu. Tanggapan menurut para pakar seperti apa? Terima kasih.
Let me just repeat this ya. Jadi dengan adanya Sustainable Development Goal, dan dengan ekonomi yang banyak yang berkembang berbasis digital, apakah ini akan mengurangi
agrikultur dan humanisme di
agrikultur dan humanisme?
Di Asia ini. Terima kasih.
Oke, thank you. Ini juga ke semuanya ya. Ke semuanya ya. Yeah. So we have three fantastic. Makasih Ibu. We have three fantastic questions being raised. Ibu Putri is asking, today is a challenging era, particularly for the younger generation, talking about the risk of job polarization. What should we do in the era of robotization, particularly in the context of human development, right? Second question is by Dr. Ahmad. Is Asian growth sustainable? The growth journey that we have experienced in the last 50 years, is that sustainable going forward? And in terms of achieving the SDG agenda, what path should Asia take? And then the last question from ST Alan Bandung is on with the digital economy, with the growth of digital economy, what is the role of agriculture and humanism in Asia? Now, before I invite our distinguished panelists to respond to these three fantastic questions, I would like to now, if I may, I would like to now turn to Dr. Juzong Zhang, who is now available through Skype, to respond to a question that I have. Doc, this is Said Zaidan Shah I'm also with ADB, Deputy Country Director of ADB. So we are here basically in UNPAD, University of Pajajaran, to discuss about the ADB's recent seminal book on Asia's journey to prosperity. I have a question for you, Dr. Zhang. So first of all, Saweda-san provided an overview of Asia's journey. Dr. Edimon Ginting provided Indonesia's context and identified the three main drivers of growth in Indonesia, as well as how Indonesia should be, what Indonesia needs to do to sustain this growth. I'd like to now turn to you, Dr. Zhang. If you could give us an insight on China's phenomenal transformation. In the book, it said that China grew by 40 times from 1960 to 2018. If you could give us an insight, maybe lessons learned for Indonesia as well, on what were the drivers of this change and what can countries like Indonesia learn from China? Over to you, Dr. Zhang.
To me, can you hear me?
We hear you loud and clear.
Hello?
Loud and clear.
Hello?
Hello? Yes, hello? Can you hear us?
Yeah, okay. So you want me to talk about China's experience, right?
China's experience, that's right.
Okay. So basically, China, I think the most important, of course, is China's success is market-oriented reform, starting from 1978. And of course, reform, it's a more gradual approach, and start from rural agricultural reform and then move on to industry reform. And the reform, the pace of reform accelerated after 1990. The Deng Xiaoping has a source tower, and then get into industry sector and SOE reform. There were privatization of SOEs, small and medium-sized SOEs. And especially, so this is market-oriented reform. The second is the open door policy, basically open to trade, open to investment for FDI. This is very important, especially, we see China's growth accelerated after China joined the WTO in 2000. And then, of course, now China become a part of a global value chain, or center of the global value chain. So market-oriented reform, and then openness, open trade, open investment. These are two most important. Plus government support. During the, when you have a market-oriented reforms, the government continue to provide guidance and play a very important role in terms of supporting private sector. So basically, this in China, the local governments play a very important role. Many cases, local government, they play like run the local economy like a company. But of course, the private sector, the idea is to promote private sector to invest and to get engaged in trade. But they provide a supporting role is very important, and certainly I think that has been quite extensively discussed. Role of the government, especially the local government, in promoting local economies. For instance, they provide loans. They basically help private sector to get loans and to attract FDI into their local economy. So it's very, very important. And apart from this, of course, there are policies, for instance, emphasize human capital development and education and health, technology innovation. So these are the, I think Sawada-san already mentioned, a list of policies important. But I think the most important for China's success for the last 40 years is the market-oriented reform and open to the outside world.
follow on, Dr. Zhang, do you think these are still the right? These are the same policy prescription that China needs to maintain in order to sustain their economic growth, or in order to sustain? Obviously, now the economic growth is no longer the economic growth that they had generated earlier. Now it's probably around. Now it's more at 6% rather than 8 and 9%. But in order to sustain the economic growth of 6% with a much larger economy, what do you think the government needs to? What policy prescription would you suggest the government the Chinese government need to take?
Yeah, I think basically the market-oriented reforms is still an incomplete process. I think there's a lot more needs to be done. For instance, reform of the SOEs. China, privatized, as I mentioned, privatized many small and medium-sized SOEs. But the larger SOEs, I think the government is basically implementing reforms to make them more commercial, the market-oriented. But still, a lot of room for improvement. So and then open. I think government is very clear that China should limit, despite the current trade dispute with conflict with the U.S. I think that China will continue to remain open and to open to trade and against protectionism. Over time, I think the government basically private sector, so reduce the over time. I think government also has to think of ways to reduce the role of the government, basically, like industrial policy, for instance, more to move towards supporting innovation, that R&Ds, rather than try to support the specific industries over time. But of course, so far in the past, some of the industrial policies, we so-called targeted industrial policies, have worked, but some have, failed. So basically, over time, I think this is Japan's case, right? Japan started with also targeted industrial policies, but over time, they move on to more kind of less targeted and support innovation, and so this have a broader impact, has a larger spillovers rather than you focus on specific industry. So that will leave it to the markets. But the government does have a role to play in promoting, supporting innovation. So over time, I think that's a way. Continue market-oriented reform, keep open trade and investment, and then if anything, the market can do and leave it to the market, but the government really to play the role of addressing market failure. So over time, basically leave to the market and private sector.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Zhang. So I guess 3 key points that I took from this is market-oriented reform, open-door policy, government support for the private sector, the support in the forms of including help promote them to get easy access to financing, human capital development, and promote innovation. So thank you so much, Dr. Zhang. I now would like to turn to our panelists here in UNPAD and ask maybe that each of you can respond to the 3 excellent questions that we received. Maybe we could ask Professor Ansari Yusuf, and then maybe we go this way. Yeah. Okay.
Maybe I will start with the questions that is the two questions from 2 different persons that I think is connected, which is related to technology, new technologies. The last one mentioned what will happen to generally speaking more traditional sectors such as agricultures and also the social aspect. What will happen to the social aspect of the new technology? I think that's a very relevant question, and you pointed right to you pointed rightly to the good direction. Okay. Related to sector, I also want to promote another study by ADB. ADB just recently almost published collections of working papers from research on impact of new technologies in Indonesia, and I was part of the project in ADB. And then my part is actually trying to see the impact of this new technology on the structural transformations. And then one of the finding correctly suggests, as what we expect, that it will help the transformations of Indonesian economy toward less reliance on some traditional sectors, which is actually agriculture, for example. So you're right. So, but I think, in my view, there is nothing to worry about in that part. Why? Because it happened already since a long time ago in many other countries. So now only a few people work in agriculture, but it can feed so many millions of people still. So there will be increase in productivity. Yeah? However, I think what most important is how to find jobs, extra job that was displaced in agriculture or in any other sectors, and that's the challenge. So we won't. We will. I'm sure we'll still enough food to eat. What more relevant is what we're going to do after we eat. Because if everything is replaced by robot, I don't think what the option available for us only playing Pokemon, okay, or Pokemon Go or something. It's not like that. So we have to find something else to do. And I think human ingenuity is very good at it. It's very good at it. I think we will find something to do, I'm sure. But of course, policy and regulation are important in making us finding a way. And what most important is education policy. Because now we cannot rely more on educating people to do routine tasks. We cannot no longer rely more on educating people on manual tasks. We have to change our orientations of educations into more cognitive tasks, adaptability tasks, versatility tasks. Simply speaking, what matters the most is arithmetic, for example, and speaking, and also person-to-person skill. So I'm not an expert on that, but I'm sure that we have to change orientations of our education system so that robot cannot replace us. So we have a challenge in education policy. And also the social aspect, that's also another challenge, because social aspects are so wide. What I mentioned in the presentation is in terms of the distributions of the gain from the robotization, from the new technology. Because now it seems that the experience in developed country, which is of course relevant. Why? Because it was what already happening. I mean, it's already happened more compared to us here. So it's actually fortunate. We can see first what happened to them, so that we can anticipate. We can anticipate what's going to happen. So the job polarization that's happening in the developed country is something that we have to worry about, because in the globalized world like this, what happened there must have happened sooner or later. Will happen here. So, but the good thing is we have time. We have time to anticipate. So what skill that we need to equip people so that we can climb to higher skill job, not to the lower skill job. So the inequality, so to avoid the social aspect, adverse aspect of inequality implications of the new technology. But inequality is not only social aspect, social issue, or humanism related issue that we have to deal with. There are so many other, yeah? Including what kind of new job that have to create, what will have an impact on our children and everything. There's so many things. The scope is so large. But you're correct that there are these two issues, traditional sectors and social aspect is the thing that we have to watch over in the futures to come related to new technology. Another one is from Pa Ahmad. I think it's about the sustainability of the ASEAN growth that we observe in Asia for the last 50 years. I think there are two meaning from that question. The first is how to sustain the growth itself. Is the growth sustained? Is the 6% sustained? I think that's already mentioned as well. And then I also mentioned that in the presentation. What sustained growth? It's not growth can be high but can be temporary. But the growth spell, what is matter? Growth spell is the durations of high growth. That's what matters. And the article in the classic, I think it will be becoming soon classic article in the GDE is that what sustained growth, and there are several factors, and interestingly, inequality is playing the bigger role. And the second interpretations of the sustainable aspect of the growth is actually the sustainable development in more general sense, which is what? Which is the social and environmental aspect of the development. And this is totally different thing because it's even wider area, and you have to touch the aspect of SDGs and things like that. But what I'm not that I don't have long experience as other here, but I interact with government in many levels, in national, in local, in regional, yeah, and also in many other countries too. I learned that the decision over what growth strategy that the country develop depend on so many other factors, rational factors, as well as political economy factors. I didn't say that political economy is not rational factor, of course, but political economy sometimes doesn't have to be rational in terms of not rational, because there are so many actions that's supposed to be rationally, especially optimally, but cannot be done because the subtle aspect of political economy. And if you see the sustainable development, you have to see who will win, who will lose if we are thinking about sustainable development. Sustainable development is a long-term agenda, for example. It's a long-term agenda. Who will win, who will lose? Those who will win is not present here. It's our future generations, our grandchildren. It's not present here. So their voice will be underrepresented. Okay, who are present here in this current generation is us, especially the politician that only have 5 years political cycles. So it is natural that the representativeness of the future generation will be a lot less compared to our present generation. So it's natural that environment agenda, for example, will be behind. Okay. However, that's not to discourage us, but at least we have to understand the complexity of the political economy. But this is not to discourage us. That's why SDG Center is here, okay? To remind people to make the representativeness of our future generation present here in the political economic context of the current context, because the decision was done is done now. Okay. However, there are other good lessons from Asia in terms of SDGs. The lesson is there are good practice, there are best practice from our fellow ASEAN countries fellow that already doing better in the sustainable development. For example, Korea. Okay? Korea. And then we can see from Korea's green economic policy has been ahead in the world. Okay, and then for the reasons that I was talking about exactly, for the rational reasons, because they see that the green economy will help them grow. Okay, not necessarily the future children. Yeah, yes, actually that will be a big bonus, that to safeguard our children's future. Yet many of the action was driven by the current context. Another example is China. 10 years ago, I was reading the long-term development planning of China years ago. And then I read that the government will establish a green economic fund, billion dollars from their budget to develop green economic investment. When I was in London in 2000, when I was doing my master, I saw solar panel advertisement, mainly European brand, everywhere. But when I come back 5 years ago or now to London, many of the advertisement of the solar panel is Chinese brand. And they already planned it long ago. And it is not necessarily they are better representing the future. No, it is economic rational too. So what I'm saying is that we have to combine our compassion toward future generation as well as the economic rational that are missing in conventional economic decision making. So the disclose, you have to disclose sometime, because environmental agenda is there actually even in the present time, but it's the market incorrectly misrepresent the values. So that's why environmental issue is more concerned about the missing economic value, unseen economic value, but it's there. The market failed to see them. So we have a responsibility to disclose those. So we will enrich more in the correct way the political economic context of decision making of the current time, so that it will best represent sustainable development. So that's, I think, my take answer to the question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think those all questions are very good and very relevant. On the robotization and human capital development, Pak Arif already covered most of the answers. I would like to add a bit on the issue of low-skill labor. Robotization is already here actually. If you are in the manufacturing sectors, when you are facing with increased labor cost, and you have the alternative robot which is less expensive, you might switch to mechanized or using robots in your production, because you need to be survive and you need to be competitive in the market, right? So it is options whether you are going to continue higher labor or you switch to robots or mechanic. The issue then, what are we going to do with our labor that is displaced by machine or robots? I think here the issue is how responsive our labor policy, because we cannot reject or deny the progress of the technology. It's there, and it's there for increasing productivity, to improve productivity. What we need to address is the layoffs, those that is been displaced by this machine and robots. And here, the training and retraining of labor is very important. Not only in the central government, also at the local government, this kind of responsive policy should be there. We should have some kind of monitoring where labor is going to be displaced, so we are not responding to when it is already happened, but we have to prepare when it is going to happen. So I think the key is training and retraining, apart from the human capital development at the university level or vocational training, to emphasize on the non-repetitive tasks, so be analytical, and the skills that already mentioned by Pak Arif. That's on the e-commerce and digital economy. I think at some point the growth of e-commerce and the digitalization also contribute or increase productivity in the agricultural sectors. Not only in Indonesia but also in other countries, the use of technology, digitization, improve the productivity in agriculture, where you don't have to manually spread the seed. You can use technology to computerization to schedule when to put fertilizer, or when to feed your fish. For example, we have e-fishery, if you ever heard about. That's basically using the technology in the agriculture sectors. I think on the sustainability of the growth, I think throughout the time the challenge is there, because external environment to a country always change, and it's need the country to address or to adopt to the current to the situation. So it is difficult to maintain or even aspire to high growth as Asia already experienced in the past. But I think that recipe, that the Washington Consensus, or all the successful factors that been mentioned, still relevant. We just need to frequently monitor, using the more frequently data to be more updated with the external economic turbulence or challenge that might happen. I think those are my additional comment to the question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Titi.
Just 2 quick points from me. I think technology and inequality, I think we should also question the questions a bit, in a way that, technology, just like knowledge, is also just a means, right? I think you still have some degree a choice how you use it. So in some way, as Buditi said, technology could replace human, but in other way, it could actually enhance equality. Take, for example, if you use technology to deliver government service, make it better reaching the poor, that enhance equality. If you use it to deliver better education, just like government was thinking, that also will increase equality. Gojek, the famous example here, that using of technology e-commerce, does that increase inequality? I think increase equality, because before that, I think the Gojek driver was not using their time, not valued their time properly. Now become a valued increase. I think, in a way, to some extent, it will still be up to the government, up to policy on how to use it, and the impact on inequality also then depend on that. And on sustainability, Ahmad, I guess Arif was right. I think Asia is actually now the leader in terms of thinking about this. Of course, in most countries now are aware of it, aware of SDGs. And if you look at every country's long-term development plan, those are there. And that's step number 1. I think increase awareness of policymakers that we need to move to better quality of growth. It is there. And secondly, I think some of the message of the book is still very applicable. I think it's about policy, about market mechanism. I think we need to price the environment damage right. I think if we price it right, then private sector will come in later. Yeah, I think if we don't price it right, if we make some certain energies too cheap, it makes alternative energy become not viable, and so on. So we need to price that right, and with that, I think private sector will come in. As you can see in China now, I think so many of this technology actually coming from private sector. I think we are now, I think Asia now is one of the leading exporter of clean energy equipment and so on. I think, again, the message is, I think collaboration between policy and government and the private sector is the answer there. I think that's all from me. Sorsan.
Thank you very much. I may recap a few things already pointed. First, broad technology or robots or fourth industrial revolution. What's the social impact? In this book, we briefly touch upon our study we have done 2 years ago as a part of Asian Development Outlook. What's the impact of fourth industrial revolution on Asian jobs? And basically, as Professor Arif also mentioned, actually labor saving, there are 2 things we found. First one is labor saving technology indeed displays the Asian jobs. In terms of Indonesian data in last 15, 20 years, because of this technological progress, 30% of job has been displaced notionally on one hand, but on the other hand, because of higher productivity over 2 decades, people's income became higher, consumption market expanded substantially. So actually there's a further room for absorbing labor. And according to our study, 70% employment increase because of this extensive merging of increase of labor markets and goods market because of productivity improvement. So net impact of fourth industrial revolution in Indonesia and also other Asian countries are largely very positive. Having said that, as Professor Arif said, there are type of laborer who are adversely affected versus those who can catch up with new opportunity. Manual labor and casual labor, doing same thing in assembly plant repeatedly. These type of workers and skill sets are more likely to be displaced by robots. But on the other hand, more cognitive intensive jobs and non-routine type of jobs, office worker, researcher, they are less likely. So naturally, there are winners and losers. And according to our study, wage rate became really different. Those who have a cognitive and non-routine type of job, wage rate in last 20 years increased faster relatively to casual and routine type of jobs. So actually, indeed, our data endorse inequality is at least partially structurally driven because of introduction of new technology. What's the policy? Possible policy intervention to handle this. So number one, as repeatedly mentioned, human capital upgrading, training, retraining, or lifelong learning. So this is something to do with the SDG goal, and Mr. Ahmed also mentioned what's the SDGs and sustain. So I think handling new challenges can also tackle the same SDG goal. So I think policies can be really carefully designed so that multiple dividends can be created, like this case, lifelong learning, relearning, and human capital upgrading. So this is one thing. The other thing is technology can be used to strengthen efficient market mechanism, and also government can support this direction. Dr. Titik mentioned about Asia in last 5-6 decades transformed trade policy from inward-oriented to flying wild geese type of catching up process, and then global value chain. Actually, this is a really major transformation. Maybe 20 years ago, or 25 years ago, when East Asian Miracle Report came out, story was simple. Japan and 4 tigers front runner, and then continuously upgrading industrial structure, and then ASEAN country and Southeast Asian country follow this trajectory, and also followed by latecomers like South Asian country, Bangladesh, India. So this homogeneous growth trajectory seems to be largely applied 25 years ago. But now, because of the emergence of new technology, transaction of goods and services became much lower. And because of that, global value chain really deepened. So this is something called second unbundling by Professor Richard Baldwin. And interesting part is this communication cost further improved. And maybe 5 years later or 10 years later, not only this intra-industry trade deepening, but also task-wise, all the production process can be split into several pieces, and each task can be assigned to different country. Okay, so this is what is called the third unbundling. If this coming reality, then I think growth pattern will be really dramatically change a lot. And there are lots of rooms. Country can tap new opportunity, or even individual can tap very nice, high-paying tasks, and they can capture. So I think if this happens, I think Asia's growth will be continued. But the role of government is really support this, privacy issues and data security issues, and also broader competition environment. Government should really, play a key role to building up a market infrastructure. When these really new technologies coming up. So this is, and also that's why structural transformation from flying wild geese type of development pattern to GBC. That's why we see a multiple heterogeneous trajectory. And admittedly, our book is less explicit about, explaining, this country took this path and that other country took this path. But for example, Philippines, now BPO business is flourishing partly because of arrival of new technology, and this trend will continue, I believe. And finally, a traditional sector and the e-commerce. I think one very important aspect is, as I initially said, agriculture sector or traditional sector play a key role. Productivity enhancement play a key role to support emergence of non-agriculture sector. And this should be continued, especially in a country like Indonesia. In technology chapter, we show what's the complexity of each country's industry, and also what's the strengths in terms of exports. Indonesia, largest exporting sector is, according to that analysis, food sector as well as apparel and textile sector. It's a middle or relatively lower technology, and this has been one of the leading exporting sector. In order to continue this, of course, technological upgrading is necessary, and also high quality, supporting a high quality agriculture like a coffee or other luxurious type of food products. I think that's really necessary. And finally, this is related to this upgrading in agriculture or traditional sector argument. Asia has been seen as factory Asia. Low but capable human capital, low wage but capable human capital, producing different manufacturing goods efficiently at cheaper price. That's why Asia became a factory Asia. And then these products are exported to developed countries, North America and Europe. But now Asia became also marketplace. Not only we are producing as a laborer, but also we started consuming. Consumption aspect is very important. Of course, the crazy rich Asian is extreme 0.5 sigma super rich, but actually according to one study, half of the middle class people now residing in Asia. And the next 10 years, this proportion becomes 2/3. So Asia became a big consumer market. So I think these aspects, this is one angle we need to watch and analyze Asia's progress. Consumer side, of course, service quality is relevant. So I think new technology, I think next step is technology and innovation will be directed towards serving already rich Asian consumers. So I think this is the, again, we briefly mentioned about this in this book, but I think next step is deep digging our big Asians transformation from factory Asia to marketplace Asia. And finally, this book is available for free from the ADB website. Our plan is to put PowerPoint slides so that people can use these materials for presentation or teaching or other purposes. So other supplementary materials will be available soon from the ADB website. With that, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Saweda-san. I like, maybe before we end this session of Q&A, or this round of Q&A rather, I like to turn now to Dr. Zhang. I'm not sure whether you caught the questions that our distinguished panelists here have responded to, but I guess that there are two questions that I, if you may, perhaps also provide some of your own spiel into it, which is Asia growth sustainable? in the context of the quality of the growth, SDG agenda is basically or essentially meant to increase the quality of the of growth in the world. What path should Asia take in order to achieve the SDG agenda? Another point that maybe if you could also give a bit of your view on is, and I think the others have discussed this as well, which is on the increasing use of digital economy in Asia. What impact does that have to the more traditional sectors, agricultural sectors, and for example, maybe I can give you 3 to 5 minutes to respond to this as well. Dr. Zhang?
Sorry, it is for me.
I was wondering, but I was wondering whether you can. I was wondering whether you can respond to some of the questions that our audience have raised. So 2 questions perhaps that they've raised several questions, but I'd like to just pick 2 questions for you to respond to. One is Asia growth sustainable? Okay. Second question is, with the growth of digital economy, what will be the impact to the traditional sectors, such as the agricultural sectors? Maybe if you could take 3 to 5 minutes to respond to this 2 questions.
Sorry, is this are these questions for me?
These questions were asked to all the panelists, so all the panelists have given their feedback, their response. We like to also hear your feedback to this question, to these 2 questions.
Okay. So you want me to talk, right? You
Yes,
want me
yes.
to answer this, to address these issues.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So the first question, whether Asia's growth is sustainable, I think cautiously I would say yes. So I'm certainly cautiously optimistic. But Asia, developing Asia, also face many challenges. I think in the book we highlighted quite a number. For instance, the issue of human capital. Although the education, for instance, has expanded substantively in terms of a number of years of schooling, but we see a large variation in terms of quality of education. This has been highlighted by, for instance, some internationally, accepted tests. We can see the large variations. Some countries, some economies are very good in terms of test results. This is about 14, 15 years old students. But some countries, some economies, results not very good. So basically, there's a large room for improvement in terms of education quality. Health, again, I think because the human capital health is also important part of the human capital. There are significant progress, but still a long way to go towards universal health coverage. In many countries, many economies, a large part of the population still don't have coverage of health. So, and then the issue of environment, of course, right? So the climate change and these are the things. I think Asia in the past focused more on growth, less on environmental protection, but now in recent decades, more emphasis is being put on environmental protection and a lot more needs to be done.
We're losing you. We lost you, Dr. Zhang. Yeah. Okay. My apologies, Dr. Zhang. Your voice is not very clear.
Like China and Korea, because there are still some countries, population, I think Indonesia is relatively.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, we lost Dr. Zhang just now. Now, sorry.
So as Dr. Zhang talked about sustainability, and also Mr. Ahmad asking about sustainability of Asian development, as I said, equality, one way is to take this lifelong learning seriously, and learning and providing some opportunity for retraining. I think that's one. But in terms of, I think sustainable development, GDP growth, continuous GDP growth is one dimension, especially achieving, first goal, no poverty goal. And the other one is a broader socio-economic, including environmental sustainability. According to, again, our study mentioned in this book, country like Indonesia and most of the developing Asian countries and economy became middle income. So now question is how to continuously upgrading income to join a high income. So, or in other words, overcoming middle income trap. According to our study and other studies, clearly showed human capital play a very important role, and also quality of education is very important, supported by infrastructure investment, especially a high end of infrastructure like energy and ICT infrastructure. So I think again, human capital investment makes sustainable development possible, and of course itself is one of the SDG goals. But at the same time, in achieving infrastructure, I mentioned infrastructure, achieving climate change resilience, both contributing mitigation, adaptation. I think infrastructure investment play a very important role in transforming more green energy source on one hand, mitigation. On the other hand, make economy and society more resilient against disasters triggered by natural hazard. So I think again, human capital investment, infrastructure, or a broader public investment play a key role to achieve a multiple objective and achieving a multiple dividends. I think that's really important to keep in mind. And government policy and intervention can be carefully designed and implemented to achieve this, generating these multiple dividends. So I think I'd like to follow.
Thank you so much, Saweda-san. And I think what you say I think will resonate well with many of the policymakers in Indonesia today, as President Jokowi in both his inauguration speech as well as his victory speech in July 2019 made it very clear that human capital development is a key plank of his second administration, together with infrastructure growth. And for ADB as well, we are currently working on our country partnership strategy. So ADB has a framework of cooperation framework with the government, and human capital development as well as infrastructure growth are two of the three strategic objectives of ADB engagement with the government from 2020 to 2024. I think with that we end today's we end this morning's seminar. I think it's been a very productive and engaging seminar. We're very grateful for our panelists. Saweda-san, our Chief Economist, Pak Edimon Ginting, our Deputy Director General for Economic Research and Department, Ibu Dr. Titik Anas, a Special Advisor to the Minister of Finance, as well as a professor in University of Pajajaran, and Professor Arif Ansari Yusuf, who's an esteemed professor as well from the Faculty of Economics, University of Pajajaran. I'd like to invite everybody to give a round of applause to all our speakers. I now turn this over to the organizing committee.
Thank you to our moderator, Mr. Said Zaidan Shah, our speakers, Mr. Yasuki Sawada and Mr. Edimon Ginting, and not forget our panelists, Mr. Arif Ansari Yusuf and Mrs. Titi Anas. You may come to your seat. Once again, thank you for our panelists for the excellent information. Ladies and gentlemen, I know the seminar of Launch of Asia's Journey to Prosperity, Policy, Market, Technology after 50 years has come to its end. Thank you everyone for your presence and last. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And also I would like to inform to the participants that you can have lunch at the back side of the hall. Thank you.